Welcome to Dig Deep, the mining podcast. In this podcast, we go deep into mining news, hot topics, and live interviews with mining professionals and leading figures in the mining industry. Introducing your host, Rob Tyson, founder and director of Mining International and Mining International Executive, a leading global mining recruitment and headhunting agency.
Hi, mining community. Welcome back to another episode of the Dig Deep, the mining podcast, the show that brings you the latest insights, thought leadership, and stories from across the global mining industry. In today's episode, I'm joined by Brad Valiukas, who's Managing Director of Kaiser Reef, an Australian gold producer with operations in Victoria and Tasmania. We're going to be talking about Brad's journey from early days on site to leading Kaiser Reef today and what's driving the company forward, his views on the gold in today's market. We're also going to discuss how his hands-on experience has shaped his leadership and what advice he'd give to the next generation of mining professionals, which I think is definitely really important. So, Brad, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
Rob, doing very well, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate your time enjoying us. You're in Perth at the moment. So, yes, I wonder if you can, as we always start these podcasts off, I just wonder if you can just tell us a little bit about your career, obviously from when you first got into the industry, and if you can walk us through how your career sort of developed to what it is today, leading obviously Kaiser Reef.
Yeah, sure. So first job in the industry was as a mining contractor. Little project up in Queensland and, fairly small mining contractor background. So I did everything there as engineer for the client, underground operator, and running shift crews at the end of that. So really good background in everything underground there, as well as what makes the financials tick from a contractor side. Went across to WA and never sort of really got out of there. After that, worked at the Plutonic Gold Mine. Ended up coming back to that again 20 years later, but that was the first job as a client. Through a number of companies, mostly gold after that. WA gold was going pretty well, lots of little jobs around the place. Ended up working for a company called Mincor, about 8 years on and off. We grew that to $1 billion company and up to 8 operations there from just starting from the one. So that was pretty fantastic. Spent a bit of time working in Ireland, one of the most important bits of my career. Met my wife over there, who was a West Australian working overseas then as well. And it's one of the reasons I've never quite got out of WA, despite being a Sydney guy originally. Plenty of other things, like 5 years at Northern Star. Went through a great growth period there, one of the Australian gold mining industry success stories, or probably just mining industry success stories, full stop. And a lot of good takeaways from that. Ultimately, most recently onto Kaiser Reef.
Right, great. Just wondering if you can just give us a snapshot of Kaiser Reef as a business.
Yeah, so we've got operations on the east coast of Australia, Victoria and Tasmania. Tasmania, almost 6 months ago now, we acquired the Henty gold mine. Produces a bit over 25,000 ounces, targeting 30,000 ounces plus per annum, and that's going really well. Producing fantastic free cash flow, and has really sort of reinvented Kaiser from what we were even just that 6 months ago. The second asset we have is in Victoria, an operation called Maldon. We've got the mill running there. The mine technically is on care and maintenance. We're treating some low grade and some ore purchase in that area, but right in the heart of the Golden Triangle in Victoria, historically produced 1.75 million ounces from quartz reefs underground. We think Henty's fantastic, having produced 1.4 million ounces, and we're still going there. Basically since the 1920s, no one's done any serious work at Maldon. Like I said, 1.75 million ounces and a huge amount of upside there. So a lot of growth and exploration to come, as well as a really solid production backbone. So, I think we're certainly come growth as a company over the next 12 months.
Great. I just want to take you back. Obviously, you mentioned your career and your first real job in mining, which I believe was obviously working for a contractor. What did you sort of learn on the ground that's really shaped how you run Kaiser today?
I think, that job there, I was involved in absolutely everything on that side. Ultimately, from the geology, making calls on night shift in headings and what was going on, the mining contract side, tightly involved with the engineers doing the design work there, and then as an operator and running the crews there as well. And I think always try and get through to everybody is learn every part of the operation. So first couple of years there, I had a fantastic opportunity to really spread out over everything. I always like to see people get as much a broad experience as early as possible. So that was just fantastic. And, really then being able to apply that, there's always an answer to everything across the rest of the career.
Yeah. Obviously, being a recruiter, I see a lot of resumes on a daily basis. Your background, you've worked in contracting and obviously then worked for the miner. Do you recommend people during their career to, and obviously I suppose predominantly people do always want to work for a mining company. Would you say for during your career that you got so much working for a contractor before coming in and working for a mining company? And do you think people should consider at least having a stint working for a contracting company?
Yeah, I think the contracting industry in Australia is so strong, and it's such a big driver for the success, particularly in Western Australia, on that side of the country. Just the amount of people that transfer between operations and the way that good information and good skills and the right way to do things, or the better way to do things, can get populated through the industry so quickly is just fantastic. And in terms of learning every part of the business, yeah, I strongly recommend everyone do a stint working for a contractor. Worked for contractors. I spent most of my time working for clients, for the principal. Some of that with contractors, some of that as owner mining. I think just get as broad an experience as early as you can.
And I know you believe in personal development, and obviously you've been in the industry for 25 years. What are probably some of the other highlights during your career, what you can still take away from what you've learned during those years and has influenced what your company doing today?
Yeah, so I've been lucky enough to be involved in building two cracking companies. So the first one being Mincor Resources. So as a nickel miner, we got up to 8 nickel mines mining around that Kambalda area. I will say, unfortunately, we never spread our wings beyond that. I think that was a missed opportunity. But in terms of what we built, before the GFC, we built over $1 billion company there. And we were mining nickel underground at half the grade compared to some of the other operations in Australia. And we were putting twice as much money in the bank. I think we did it fantastically well. Just always, key takeaways from that, always that desire to grow and expand and do it well. And never ever sitting back, in terms of putting 8 operations online basically in 8 years, never ever sitting back and saying, right, that's enough, we're in a comfortable position now, as well as good as that might have been. And then, Northern Star is very much the same, and clearly driven by Bill Beeman at that time in the business, and for all those early years, obviously, and well more than just the early years. But just that desire to grow and to keep pushing and never saying, right, that's enough. We're at a point where we're happy. Whenever we've achieved success, it's straight away, like it's the next day, right? What are we doing now? Where are we going? What are we going to do? Just never sitting back. And I think, for mining, every single operation is mining a resource that at some stage we're going to deplete and finish. So you'd always need to be thinking, what are we doing after this mine? And even in that mine, what are we doing next? Because we're going to mine this today. We've got to be ready for the next thing. So that ongoing bow wave of capital, both drilling and infrastructure and decline development, and just pushing out all the time.
Kaiser Reef is obviously not new to you, and you've been actively involved on the board for some time. And obviously you became MD in recently in October. What surprised you most since moving into the MD role, and maybe something that you didn't necessarily realise until now, stepping in obviously into the position?
Look, I'd like to say it was actually relatively smooth. So one of the things that was surprising was just actually how easy everybody in the business just transitioned and kept going with what we were doing. So obviously that was really pleasing as well. But I think overall we haven't really missed a beat. Like I said, we just finished bedding in Henty, so there's a whole new crew coming there, merging that and our existing teams in Victoria. Just how seamless that's been and how keen everybody's been to get on with it. Positive rather than negatives in terms of surprises.
Yeah, no, good. Obviously, you mentioned that you've obviously got assets in Victoria and Tasmania, and with gold being a hot commodity at the moment and probably for the last year or two, and then I think it's going to be in the news for a while longer. What's your view on gold and I suppose the gold market, and I suppose then afterwards within the context of the states that you're operating in?
Yeah, so early 2000s, I did some graduate economics. I became a gold bull very much at that time in terms of what's happening to money aggregates and the way the world was trending. And even as a nickel miner, I was certainly still remained a gold bull, and one way or another, I've always been pulled back into the gold mining side of the business. So, I personally think that there's still a way to go in terms of gold price. I don't think we're at a top. I think the geopolitical issues and structural issues in terms of fiat currencies not being back since 1971 are going to remain, and there's nothing that anybody's going to do to change that. And I see that I think M2 money supply in the US is going to start increasing, and I look at M3 money supply every month here in Australia, and we're back over 7% in terms of inflation of the money supply. So yeah, I don't think that our global issues are going anywhere anytime soon. Unfortunately, though, I can't run the business on that basis, so we take a fairly conservative view of what the gold price is when we're making operational decisions. At the same time, trying to give ourselves the most exposure going forward. It's trying to find the right balance. We get paid at a price on the day. We're making commitments, and price can go up and down regardless of where it might go long term. We're mining in a period where a price 3 months from today will be crucial for whether we made the right decision with that development, and then putting that stoping in 3, 6, 12 months when we start talking about declines. So always trying to maintain a good safety buffer from where we are currently.
And I suppose following on from that, how does your view impact in obviously how you operate and or actually sort of position the assets moving forward?
Yeah, so I think there's obviously two bits to that question. One is how we operate, and that's making sure we leave that decent safety buffer there. But in terms of how we position the assets going forward, we want to have exposure to a rising gold price. And I think most of the people that invest in Kaiser want exposure to the gold price. I mean, we're not a dividend paying company at the moment. So if you're putting money in, you're, relying on our ability to produce gold, to produce revenue, and getting exposure to that gold price upside. So, Tasmania, we've got regional exploration to come later this financial year. We've just put the second drill rig back in underground to try and push that envelope out in terms of our resources. Again, we're trying to get that long-term exposure. And Maldon is a great project. People that have had it for the last few operators that have held on to it, like I said, it's been mined. It hasn't been mined seriously now for 100 years. Have never had the money to put into it. But I think that we'll take some of our profits from Tasmania, from Henty, and we'll put those into Maldon, build a nice big resource, and try and give people that exposure to gold ounces in the ground.
You've now owned Henty for almost 6 months. What's the one operational win that you're most proud of to date?
Yeah, good question. So there's a few things there. Like we've had some really good success just in terms of pushing the process plant up in terms of throughput, getting everybody engaged on the underground to take out some of the restrictions that have been there for 25 years. Henty was a bit of an unusual development. So there's a decline down from surface, and then just below surface there's a head frame, a winder installed underground, and then there's an underground shaft, and then there's a decline that continues on from that underground, and then the connection between the top decline and the bottom decline was done a little bit small. So we've just gone through and bypassed that. But I think so. There's things that we've done that are really happy with and how they're progressing, but the upside is always, people, or the best things generally getting people. So being able to put that vision forward and say, if we do this, we'll be able to achieve that, and getting people to come along for the journey on site and accept that and adopt it and, give it their all to achieve it is what we can, as managers, that's what we are always looking for.
I just wonder if you can comment on the gold market within, I suppose, Victoria and Tasmania, and then the wider Australian market, how the gold industry is performing, whether it's exploration or even in production.
Yeah, so I think it's super healthy. I can see that we're going to get very stretched in Australia in terms of operators, underground, open pit, and technical people. We haven't quite got there yet, but you can just start to see that coming on. Very similar to the boom that had never end before the GFC, and then in the early 2010s, gold had a bit of a stellar run there as well, and it got very tight. So you can just see that starting to come into the industry. Western Australia in particular, there's quite a few new startups coming through and new undergrounds, and I think that's just fantastic for the state in general and the country. West Australia very pro mining. Victoria is maybe a little bit of a tougher jurisdiction to operate in. Some different perspectives on what adds value to the economy, I think, between the states. So we try and work through that and navigate that as best as we can in Tasmania, but it certainly requires work and effort beyond what we'd expect in WA. And then just across the Tasman, south of Victoria into Tasmania, it's been fantastically welcoming, and I think there's a really strong mining culture on the west coast of Tassie. A lot of similarities to WA in terms of wanting to get on with it and do things. So that's been fantastically good.
I know you're passionate about mentoring and trying to develop our younger generation. I just wonder what advice you'll give to sort of young mining engineers, or even just young people in our mining industry that are starting out today, and how they should look at their careers and how they can potentially, I suppose, develop their careers similar to how you've gone about your career.
Yeah, so number one thing I always say to young people coming, especially on site for early in their careers is think of yourself as a mining professional. So you might have an expertise in geology or engineering or surveying or geotech. Try and let go of that a little bit. Experience as much of the operation as you possibly can. Put yourself in other people's positions, how they go about that business, because that gives you the aspect, the perception of what your customer requires. Everybody's a customer on a mine site. If you're the manager, you've got 100 people relying on you all the time. That's your job to service them. If you're a mining engineer, your job is to produce plans. So you have customers as your operators, and jumbo operators break dirt. So their customers are the bogger operators and the truck drivers, and all the way through the mill. So just try and get as broad a experience of as many operations as possible as you can, and take yourself out of any silo.
Yeah. And I suppose moving on from that, once they've experienced their role being on site, maybe 3 to 5 years, is there any advice that you can give them about outward looking, moving their career forward for the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, and I think so. One of the reasons to get as much experience, and I probably didn't understand it in the early days, but I think it's been fantastic afterwards. The more you see of the operation and other people's jobs, etc., the better, because at some stage you go beyond being from a graduate mining engineer to a mining engineer to a senior mining engineer, etc. And you start managing whole teams of people with completely different disciplines. So, again, get that broad aspect and branch out to the accounting side and the finance or the economics. Understand how you really make a difference to the business. That's how you can be successful in that business, and B, at some stage when you're hopefully sitting on top of a business, you can still apply that same knowledge and bring other people along at the time.
A question I'm going to ask, because I've asked this in the last a few recent podcasts. You mentioned obviously look at the financials, and I had a few people on that have gone back to study, study further qualifications, whether that's an MBA, whether it's a master's, maybe in business administration or something financial. I just wondered if you've done that, and if you haven't, have you benefited in other ways by not studying, by being in operations?
Yeah, so I did. I went back to, and at Murdoch Uni did a graduate in economics, which is good. Only a diploma. Did go and start doing Masters of Mineral Economics. I didn't complete that, partially because I ended up in a stand-up argument with a lecturer talking about money aggregates and things like that. And, there's different schools of economic thought. And by that stage, I'd worked out that, my view on money and money aggregates, I was an Austrian or a monetarist, and that wasn't in line with what the educational system was. So you can do that, or you can do your own. I think, Elon Musk has got it not too bad, where he avoids PhDs for a lot of his hires because he wants people that have got that, practical experience, and just haven't done the educational requirement. I think there's definitely a balance there. And you can learn so much in the industry. Like if you take the time and you get involved in all aspects of what's going on, you just learn so much.
Yeah, no worries. And lastly, what's the outlook, short to medium term outlook for Kaiser Reef, and if there's anything else that you like to add to our audience?
Yeah, so we've been making some really good progress at Henty. Should solidify that over the remainder of this financial year, so this quarter and then the first half of next year, and hopefully we're producing strongly then, above 30,000 ounces going forward, and adding to resource with second drill rig underground at the moment, drilling that out. So really solidifying that strong base that's there, but also trying to add some resilience into the operation there. So regardless of gold price, we're in a really good position. And then at Maldon, which I said is really our growth asset there, expect to see some rehabilitation going on in the decline, re-establishing underground drill positions, getting going with drilling both surface and underground. And we've got such a massive amount of potential there. Really just need to get active on the ground. Heap of background work going on at the moment, and over the next 6 months you'll see all of that come out.
Yeah. Brad, really appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing your story, telling us about Kaiser Reef, and talking about obviously the gold market, and especially within Australia, and mentoring, and providing advice obviously on for the younger generation and what they should be looking out for. So really appreciate your time. If our audience wants to reach out to you, if they've got any questions, they want to follow the story, how can they go about doing that, and what social media platform channels are you on?
So easiest way to follow Kaiser directly is just go to the Kaiser Reef website, kaiserreef.com.au. Subscribe there. There's email on that page as well. When we put our announcements, we always post on Twitter, and LinkedIn is the obvious places to follow us. But yeah, please reach out direct to the company.
Yeah, no worries. Well, thank you again. Maybe you want to come on the podcast sometime next year and give us an update, and maybe speak about something else you're passionate about in terms of obviously mentoring. We might have an episode a little bit more around the mentoring and what people, our younger generation or even more experienced people, should be looking out for. So yeah, more than welcome to come back on.
Rob, thanks very much for the opportunity today, and it's great to talk.
Yeah. No worries. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode. As always, appreciate your continued support. Good episode to share. Obviously, speaking about personal development and how our younger generation should maybe looking at things, and Brad obviously gave a few tips as to what our younger generation should be looking to do. Really appreciate if you could share these episodes far and wide, no matter where you are in the world, as long as you're in the mining industry, or even if you're not in the mining industry. I think we've been speaking about gold, and the gold's definitely in the market, in the news at the moment. So I think we can educate some of those people in one way or another. Thank you again for listening, and until next time, happy mining.
Thank you for listening. Remember to reach out to Rob via the show notes, and be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Until next time, happy mining, helping each other to improve the mining industry.